it wasn't long ago where if you wanted a report, you'd call the IT group and they'd be like, I'll run a report. Yeah, I'll be back in a month. Now folks are going to ChatGPT saying, write a poem for my wife. And it's actually pretty good, right? It's crazy.
Welcome to another installment of the Next Gen case study series. In this episode, we have on Tony Duarte, who is a key figure at Heavy.AI, where he contributes significantly to their innovative efforts in the realm of AI and big data analytics. Tony has participated in several high-profile discussions and webinars where he shared insights on the application of AI in optimizing 5G network infrastructure. And we're excited to have him on the show. Tony, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So if I could, Tony, let's just start with a quick kind of Cole's Notes version of your background, who you are, where you came from, and how you ended up getting involved with Heavy.AI.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the technology sector for over 30 years. Started off early in my career co-founding a company that was supporting ETL for business intelligence solutions back in the mid-90s. And have pretty much stayed in the data/AI space since then. Worked at a lot of larger companies in addition to startups, SAP within their digital transformation group, and specifically to their AI and database technologies. And most recently joined Heavy.AI, helping them with their market strategy and support for our offerings within the international sectors specific to telecommunications, energy and oil, utilities, and a few other key verticals that we support.
So when it comes to customer acquisition, customer experience, and kind of like mapping all of that out, what do you guys do in the way of kind of outlining what a customer's experience should be from maybe those prospecting stages to sealing a deal and actually becoming a full-blown client?
Yeah, so probably be better if I talked about how we enable that for some of our customers, because we're an enabling kind of disruptive technology. And so what we do is we empower organizations the ability to take massive data sets and be able to analyze them through AI and ML and traditional kind of advanced analytics approaches. And we're talking, billions of records with sub-second response times. So it enables organizations to identify opportunities they normally wouldn't, because we can help you layer different data sets so that you can kind of find that needle on the haystack. And then also start to work on looking into the future, right, in terms of predictability and trends that they might want to be aware of. I'll give you an example of one that led to customer acquisition through a problem that was initially kind of the heartburn for the customer. This was in the telecommunications sector, and this particular organization spent a lot of money on network expansion of their 5G mobile network with the anticipation that they would get more customers and better brand recognition, which is kind of a logical assumption. Unfortunately, after they spent all that money, they found out through customer surveys that their customer sat went down and they actually weren't making any more money. So, we're talking, a 10-figure investment. Wow. So, obviously the key executives wanted to know why. And although it sounds like a simple question to drill into at the customer level, what kind of experience are they having on your mobile network is not an easy task for a telco. Think about, any major telco that, you replace your carrier's name here, right? And ask them to identify how Devin's experience was yesterday at these times of the day when they have, hundreds of millions of customers. That's just a massive data set, right? So that kind of obviously speaks to our strength. So what we did was basically do some analysis for them with all of the session information for each customer. And a session is basically every time you make a call, and then identify what that customer experience was at a very granular level, and then correlate that to network experience for that particular area, potentially call call center tickets for complaints and other inputs, call surveys. And through that process, we helped them identify what the root cause was, and that had to do with optimizing the network. But what they actually found and what they did, and this kind of speaks to the customer acquisition part of the question, was that it boiled down to certain customers in certain areas having bad bandwidth and network performance, which they wouldn't have been able to get to that level of granularity. And then that gave them the insights to put together a marketing offering to offload them from 5G to a high-speed in-home package. And so they were able to identify the problem, which was kind of amazing in and of itself, but then they were able to pivot very quickly and drive customer acquisition and revenue without really spending much.
Wow. Okay. So my first question, I guess, like where my head went first was who decides what data is important and how to measure that data? Does that come from the company that you're working with, or are you the one that kind of like identifies some of the KPIs and things like that?
Yeah, good question. So we always start off with the business objective, right? And that's kind of the end goal. Otherwise, it's kind of an academic exercise, right? And then in this case, also, we knew what that was. And then from there, we collaborate with the customer to identify what data sets they have internally. And if they don't have those data sets, what data sets are available either free through kind of public means and or that they could purchase from private companies. And generally going through that exercise with the end vision in mind, the business objective kind of leads you through that process of what data sets ideally can you get, and then apply those to obviously, without the right data sets, analytics is useless, right? So it's a very good and valid question, but it is a very collaborative process that we take with our customers.
So when you do figure out like, okay, this is the business objective, we're headed in this direction, this is the things that we're looking to achieve, that gives you an outline then for the types of things that you should be measuring. What happens in an instance where you're missing a data set? Do you go to the clients or to the customer base of your client to establish that data, or do you have some mechanisms in place to gather it?
We do, because you never have all the data you want.
Right.
Right. It's just, and even if they have the data, you get these things like GDPR and security issues where data privacy comes into place. So even though they have it, they might not let you use it. Right. And so we often do look for alternative data sets that we could use to kind of backfill that. And that's really kind of on a case by case basis. But generally, we can find a way to blend in what will get the job done, even if we don't have the most quote ideal data set.
So where is this working the best? Because I imagine you have a lot of different verticals, right? There's a lot of different people that could benefit from this, but in your experience right now, like who is your primary service sector?
Yeah, so our primary verticals, we do a lot with the government, as you would expect. Do a lot with telecommunications, a lot with energy, being oil, gas, utilities, and then a few others. But as you would expect, all of those have massive data sets that get generated, right? Think about how much data an oil well produces every second, probably close to, a few hundred gig. And they all have an element of geospatial analytics to them, right? So if you're in the government, obviously looks at regions and areas. Telcos look at markets that they want to get into, right? Oil and gas, pretty much the same. They got wells in certain locations. Utilities have power lines all over the place that they want to make sure don't catch on fire, right?
Yeah.
And so we solve problems that are usually where other traditional analytical systems just kind of fall a little short in terms of processing that data, right? And so I would say, although we focus on those verticals, they've been the most effective for us. There's no reason why we couldn't go across other vertical markets. I'd say the key element is You have to have massive data sets. And when we're talking massive, we're talking billions of rows of records. You want to have some kind of geospatial element to it. And we can process satellite data and LiDAR and all this stuff where, again, traditional analytical systems aren't designed to do that. Those are hard questions and queries to ask, right? And then we were able to let you interact with that data if you're going to have a human in the loop at conversational speed, like, as I said, sub-second. So when you're in the front end interacting with a 500 million records, which for us is nothing, you would think you're interacting with 100. And then if you apply that to, machine learning and AI, we can run simulations against our system that would take many, 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 many days. And again, generally, hours or seconds. So if you think about what that enables, oftentimes folks are just conditioned to not try it because they got to aggregate data because they know the systems they just can't do it. Whereas we almost have to kind of re-educate folks to think a bit differently and say, no, you can do it now. If you could do that, where do we add value to the business and what's the art of the possible here? So in that regard, it's very evangelical.
Right.
And it's super cool, right? Because you're really kind of blazing the trail of the next generation of insights and machine learning.
Once you have spent some time gathering up all the data, you can then interact with it in real time in terms of uh, I don't know if I'm maybe off the mark here, but using an analogy, it's kind of like a large language model like GPT, where you can conversate with the intelligence that you've gathered. Is that the scenario here, or am I a little off base?
You're definitely on point. So there are a couple of different ways that applies. One is we do have kind of a browser-based front end, right, where you can interact with that data much like you would any other analytic system. But envision interacting with a billion records, and it's coming back within a second or less, right? The second is you can apply machine learning and AI to that, right? So now you can do predictive modeling, you can do all that type of stuff against data sets that are massive. And because our architecture includes running on a GPU, we partner with NVIDIA, it takes that processing down, massively, right?
Yeah.
And then you mentioned GPT. We actually also have just introduced a large language model for conversational analytics that's within Heavy. And ours is specifically designed for enterprises, right? So the way that we do it, the data never leaves your environment. One of the things that is of concern to enterprises is I don't want to set my data outside the organization, right?
Right.
And so that's generally a showstopper for a kind of true enterprise level, what I call conversational analytics and what we call conversational analytics. But getting massive interest in that because that's usually the first step in letting you, as you say, have a conversation with your data, explore it, and then start to figure out where you might want to drill in a little bit more, right? And so I think you really need all of those elements because one will lead to the other, right? You might start off with an LLM to explore it, identify an interesting area that want to drill into a little bit more, start to look at it through the interface and some visualizations, and then maybe apply some machine learning or some Python scripts or models to go against that to start to do more advanced things. So they're all kind of interrelated, but to answer your question, we have all of the above.
And so is that third-party stuff that you're kind of like gluing together, or is this more proprietary internal things that you're developing as you are kind of on a case-by-case scenario?
Yeah, so the central stack, the central Heavy.AI, what we call Heavy.AI Enterprise Platform, is all our technology that sits on top of NVIDIA GPUs. That's why it's so performant. And we've got patented technology. We've been doing this for 10 years. So we've been doing this before GPUs were even being thought of beyond gaming, right? And then we integrate with what you would expect, right? So we need to integrate with the data sources, right, to make it easy to get the data in the system. We integrate with other third-party technologies that make sense, like Python and Jupyter Notebooks and all those relevant components. But the core, no pun intended, heavy lifting is done by our platform. So the processing and the visualizations and all that stuff.
Right. And that allows you to maintain that promise with your clients that anything that's being kind of integrated into that ecosystem it stays inside of that atmosphere.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
so okay, what are some creative ways then in this technology, or that you've noticed this technology is helping these companies in their customer relationship management? Like obviously there's that initial the sales and the marketing aspect of it, and I'd love to get your perspective on AI's role in that. But then on the backside of that, there's like onboarding and managing those relationships, nurturing leads, all kinds of other applications that we've seen with AI. What are some creative things that you've noticed in your space?
Yeah. So I guess again, from an offering perspective, if you think about how this could be applied uh, in terms of importing and analyzing marketing data and strategic planning, right? Again, I'll point to a telco. Uh, Common question. We're going to spend X billions of dollars in capex to go after a market that we want to get X amount of ROI on, right? Where do I go? Based on data, not based on a hunch, right? So you need to be able to pull on competitive performance information. You need to look at a certain geographic area. You got to pull in what it's going to cost you to go after that market based on whether you go mobile or fiber or whatever infrastructure you're going to deploy. What's my cash flow look like? All that stuff has to come into play to make a strategic decision whether you're going to go after that market segment, what you're going to do. And then that funnels down to the operational teams, right? So we decide we're going to go after this market segment for these reasons. Here's the expected ROI on, CapEx versus revenue. And then that will help the marketing teams and the strategic teams sit down and plan out their go-to-market execution on that, right? That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is if you flip that on its head, angry customers don't buy, right? So the whole CRM thing. And again, I'll use telecom because it's a great example. If my phone doesn't work at work and only works at home, I'm switching, right? I mean, there's not a lot of stickiness to telco nowadays. And so telcos have to go beyond. Long gone are the days where they just kind of throw towers anywhere, have good coverage, and claim to have the best network, and that's good enough, right? They need to get much more granular down to the customer experience level. That's a hard thing to do, right? So now you need to take those massive data sets and maybe overlay them. As I said, you can add multiple layers of data. So let me take network performance data. Let me overlay that with my call center tickets. Let me overlay that with the regions. And now I can start to proactively identify which customers are not happy. And not only which customers are not happy, why are they not happy? And then I can sit down with the marketing group and maybe the inside sales group and say, we're going to put together a campaign for this targeted group of customers in this market, offering them this. So we, A, reduce churn, which is bad for telcos or any company for that matter, right? And B, we get market share, right? So it's not it's not a traditional, I'm going to deploy the CR application and everything's going to be great, right? We come at it from the strategic analytics perspective to then drive those processes, initiatives, all that type of stuff for our customers. So, marketing groups, they struggle with massive data system. I mean, think about how much data, a pharma is trying to gather from, Google and all their social media companies and all their marketing channels to try and figure out, A, how are they doing? B, if they're not doing great, why? Where are they not doing well? Let me get down to the level of, ideally, the individual customers. And so it's just a much different way to approach it. It's more analytical than prescriptive. It's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, well, and especially when you're dealing with such a massive amount of data from such a large company. When you look at like telco as an example, I know there's only two or three big players. All the other ones are small players that eventually get eaten up by the big players. So it's like there's a lot of information. And then when that happens, when acquisitions occur or any of those situations happen, there's more data that you have to acquire, sift through, and then turn into something useful.
I had a conversation with the chief innovation officer for one of the largest telcos, and real world example, and this happens everywhere. They sit down at a strategic planning meeting, and marketing group comes in with their reports from their data sources. Finance comes in with their reports from their data sources. Networking comes in with their reports from their data sources, on and on and on. None of those are connected. So they're sitting there with a bunch of siloed data pieces trying to figure out what to do, and you can't. When we come in, we overlay all those together, and just by the virtue of doing that and having the processing power, you now have one source of truth to try and figure out what the heck to do.
Right.
And that's across any industry. And pretty much every mid to large size organization has this problem. They got more data than they know what to do with.
That seems to be the big problem too now, especially in the digital age, is that the collection of data is prevalent, but the application or usage of that data is, I don't think, being properly managed. So the fact that you're tackling that issue is admirable, and I'm grateful for that. In terms of what you see kind of coming down the pipeline, and just to kind of wrap things up here, what's some things that you're kind of excited about in terms of new developments and new technology that's coming our way?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think we're at a strategic inflection point in the market in general, right? So I think Jensen, from the CEO from NVIDIA, put it the best. If you guys are familiar with Moore's law, where it said that compute's going to double every X amount of time, he said that's dead, right? CPUs are kind of hitting their limits. Now, Intel and some folks might disagree, but the whole computing paradigm has shifted, right? And so, in order to take advantage of the next wave, you really need to rethink about how you're going to leverage GPUs and processing power to not get left in the dust, right? And so I think, I guess we'll tie into your customer user experience, or the user experience. That user experience is driven by a lot of things. It's driven by the insights the company get to drive innovation. It's driven by the product managers kind of staying ahead of the curve and continue to improve the product and the experience for the customers. And a lot of that is getting to the point where you can do things you never did before. So take an example of an LLM. Now I can automate a lot of the things on the back end that have intelligence, some level of intelligence or logic built within them, as proven by what ChatGPT does, right? And so that helps the user experience on the front end, because now I've got meaningful conversational feedback from my interaction with X SaaS product. I'll just use SaaS as an example, right? On the back end, that allows you to drive automation and innovations to support that customer experience that you couldn't do. You just couldn't do it before. Computers have been kind of dumb for a while, right? And now they're actually starting to get to the point where, it's going to enable a lot more insights and a lot more interaction that we've never dreamed of. So I'd say LLMs and conversational analytics are going to be massive. It's going to really democratize access to insights, especially within analytics that were never. It wasn't long ago where if you wanted a report, you'd call the IT group and they'd be like, "I'll run a report. Yeah, I'll be back in a month." Now folks are going to ChatGPT saying, "Write a poem for my wife," and it's actually pretty good, right? It's crazy. So that's going to drive a lot of innovation and customer experience that, by nature of that innovation, company is going to benefit from.
Tony, you've been very generous with your time and your wisdom, and I appreciate all that you've shared with us today. In closing, I like to kind of leave on a high note here with a question that I ask everybody. When you think of all of this technology and the challenges that it's presenting. Obviously, there's a lot of people that are in a similar position to you in that they're exploring some of this stuff and trying to figure out what it's for, how to use it, what its capabilities are, and where it fits best inside of our day-to-day activities. If you had a piece of advice for that group of people who are kind of exploring some of this stuff, what would that piece of advice be, Tony?
I'm going to steal from one of my idols, Steve Jobs and Einstein, and think different.
Yeah.
Right, folks are very conditioned to be doing the same thing, for the last 20 years, and now there's, as I say, a strategic inflection point. So, first and foremost, think about the end goal. What are you trying to accomplish, right? Because a lot of folks get mangled up in the technology piece, and they lose sight of what they're trying to do. Right, the technology will enable it. People will make it happen, but you need to know where you want to go. And generally, the first part of that process to do it intelligently is do it based on facts and data. Don't do it based on hunches and assumptions, right? And that's why we start with that process for our customers. The rest will fall into place. There's plenty of technology. As I said, there's more data than you need, but it can get overwhelming. So have a clear vision. Start with data, set some strategies, and then the rest will fall into place.
And on that note, Tony, shameless plug opportunity. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to get in touch with you, maybe to work with you or pick your brain further, how would they do that?
Yeah, feel free to email me, Tony, Tony, Duarte, Duarte, at Heavy.AI.
Beautiful. Thanks for joining me today. If anybody wanted to get in touch with us for any reason, it's nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode, and I will see you in the next.